Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at the FAO's State of Food and Agriculture Report, their 2024 edition.
Great report.
Yeah, have you had a chance to look through it?
Yeah, definitely.
So one of the things that really jumped out at me was this concept of hidden costs. And they're basically making the case that our food systems have all of these impacts, like, environmental impacts, social impacts, health impacts, that we just don't see reflected in the price of food at the store.
Yeah,
So I'm really excited to kind of dig into that with you today and get your take on it.
absolutely.
So maybe just to start off, you're someone who really understands systems and how things connect.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of break down for us, like, what do we mean by hidden costs when we're talking about the food system?
Yeah, so the report defines hidden costs as those that aren't factored into the market price.
Okay,
So when you go to the grocery store, you see a price.
right.
That price is not reflecting all of the downstream consequences of producing, distributing, consuming that food. Right.
So the costs to the environment, to social systems, to health, all of that is external to that price that you see.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like, if I'm thinking about, let's say water pollution from a farm,
Right.
that would be considered a hidden cost.
Right.
Right, because the price of my food doesn't include the cost of, like, cleaning up that pollution or dealing with the health problems that it might cause. And that's just one example.
Yeah, and you can think about greenhouse gas emissions from livestock, the social costs of, say, poor working conditions in the food industry.
Wow.
These are all these costs that we are not paying for when we buy food.
And the report puts a pretty hefty price tag on these hidden costs, right? I mean, it's trillions of dollars globally.
It is, yeah. They estimate that unhealthy diets alone cost the world over $1 trillion.
A trillion.
Yeah,
That's wild.
that's a huge number.
And that's something we're all paying for in some way, right? Whether it's through higher healthcare costs or, reduced productivity, even damage to the environment that impacts our quality of life. Exactly.
Wow, okay. So the report goes on to kind of break down these hidden costs into three main domains: environmental, social, and health.
Right.
But before we get into those specific, I'm kind of curious, like, how does this whole concept of hidden costs actually play out in the real world?
Right.
Does the report have any examples of, like, how this works in practice?
Yeah, so there was one campaign that I found pretty interesting. It was run by the Pin NY supermarket chain in Germany.
Okay.
So they ran this campaign where they temporarily raised prices on certain products to reflect their true cost.
So interesting.
So that included the hidden environmental and social impacts.
So instead of just seeing the sticker price,
Yeah.
you were actually confronted with, like, the real cost of your choices.
Right.
What was the reaction to that?
It was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Some people were very willing to pay the higher prices, especially those who are already concerned about sustainability.
Right.
But then you also had a lot of shoppers who experienced sticker shock. They were not prepared to pay more for the same products, even if they understood the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, I guess it's one thing to, like, understand the concept of hidden costs in theory, but then when you see it reflected in your grocery bill, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It highlights the challenge of trying to create a food system that does account for these costs,
Yeah.
If consumers aren't willing to pay more for, say, sustainable and ethical products, it's going to be very difficult to shift the market in that direction.
It's almost like we need some way to, like, accurately measure and then communicate those hidden costs in a way that consumers can understand and act on.
Right, and that's where the concept of true cost accounting comes in.
Okay.
So it's basically a way of trying to quantify those hidden environmental, social, and health costs
Okay.
to put a dollar value on them so we can better understand the full impact of our food choices.
But we can actually see,
Mhm.
like, how much those hidden costs are adding to the price of our food.
Yeah.
And then use that information to maybe inform government policies, consumer choices, all kinds of things.
Exactly.
It's like, imagine if food labels not only had, like, nutritional content, but they also had, like, the environmental and social impacts of that product
Yeah,
right there.
that would be a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got this idea of hidden costs, and we've got this idea of true cost accounting as a way to kind of measure and address those costs.
Right.
Now, the report goes on to kind of break down those costs into specific categories.
Right.
And it starts with the environmental impacts of our food system. So what are some of the key takeaways there? Like, what are the big environmental impacts that we need to be thinking about?
Well, probably one of the biggest ones that it's talked about is greenhouse gas emissions.
Right.
So agriculture is a major contributor to climate change.
Yeah.
It accounts for a significant amount of global emissions.
Right, so even if I'm not driving my car, like, my food choices are still contributing to climate change.
Exactly.
And it's not just about emissions, right? I mean, there are other environmental impacts as well.
Right. The report talks about things like water pollution from agricultural runoff, like we mentioned before, land degradation from unsustainable farming practices.
Yeah.
These can deplete soil nutrients, reduce biodiversity.
Yeah.
Really significant impacts.
It sounds like we're talking about a pretty significant impact on the planet.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, the report actually, like, categorizes global food systems into 6 different types,
They do, yeah.
each with kind of its own set of environmental challenges.
Right.
Maybe we just touch on that briefly just to give listeners a sense of, like, the bigger picture here.
Yeah, so those 6 systems, they kind of range from those low-income countries facing long-term crises to those highly productive, large-scale farming systems.
So it's not just like industrial agriculture that's the problem.
Right.
It's like there's different types of food systems and they all have their own kind of costs and benefits.
Exactly. Each one has its own unique footprint.
Okay, so it's not about pointing fingers.
No.
It's about understanding, like, the nuances of different food systems and, like, finding solutions that work within those specific contexts.
Exactly. And the report really emphasizes the need for what they call agri-food systems transformation.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty fundamental shift in how we produce, distribute, and consume food.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is.
But I think we need to dig into that a little bit more.
Definitely.
But first, let's shift gears and talk about the social costs of our food system, because I think this is an area that often gets overlooked.
Right.
So what are some of the key issues that the report highlights here? Like, when we're talking about social costs, what are we talking about?
Well, one of the most pressing issues that comes to mind is the treatment of workers in the food industry.
Yeah.
There's concerns about low wages, poor working conditions, even things like forced labor in some parts of the world.
Oh, wow.
It's a serious issue.
Yeah, I mean, these are issues that, like, often get swept under the rug, especially in global supply chains, where it's so hard to trace where our food comes from.
Right.
And it's not just about working conditions, right? There are broader social implications as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Food insecurity, access to healthy food.
Okay.
So you have millions of people around the world who still lack access to adequate nutrition,
Yeah.
even in countries that have plenty of food.
That's such a stark contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, we have all this food being produced, but it's not getting to the people who need it most.
Yeah, it highlights the issue of distribution
Right.
and the need for more equitable systems.
Right.
So everyone can access nutritious food no matter how much money they make or where they live.
And the report also touches on gender inequality within the food system.
Right, it does.
I mean, it's clear that, you know, women play such a crucial role in food production, especially in developing countries. But they often face discrimination
yes.
and lack of access to resources, you know, and opportunities. It seems like these social costs are really deeply intertwined with issues of, you know, poverty, injustice, and inequality.
Absolutely.
And it makes you realize that the food we eat is connected to a much larger web of, you know, social and economic relationships.
Yeah, for sure. And it really underscores the fact that transforming our food system isn't just about environmental sustainability.
Right.
It's about social justice, making sure that everyone who's involved in the food system is treated fairly,
Yeah.
has access to the resources they need.
That's such a powerful message, and it makes me realize that, you know, there's so much more to consider than just what's on my plate.
Yeah.
We're also talking about the people who grow our food, who harvest it, who prepare it,
Right.
and the systems that connect us all.
It's all connected.
Okay, so that brings us to the third domain of hidden costs, which is health.
Right.
And this is where things get really personal, because it's about how our food choices impact our own well-being. And I'm guessing this is where those, like, trillion-dollar costs associated with unhealthy diets come into play.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what are we seeing in terms of the health impacts of our food choices?
Well, the report talks about these rising costs of diet-related diseases, things like heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancer.
Wow, yeah.
These are diseases that are often linked to, you know, diets that are high in processed foods, saturated fats, sugar, salt, low in fruits and vegetables, whole grains.
Yeah. And it seems like, you know, we're talking not just about the environmental costs of our food system and the social costs, but the cost to our own health,
Exactly.
both, you know, in terms of individual well-being,
Right.
but also the strain on healthcare systems.
Right. huge costs, both in terms of medical expenses and lost productivity.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already in this first part of our deep dive.
We have?
We've talked about the concept of hidden costs, the environmental, social, and health impacts of our food system. We even touched on true cost accounting as a potential tool for, kind of addressing these issues.
Right.
But, the good news is the report's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
It also outlines like a path forward, right?
Yeah.
Focusing on what they call agri-food systems transformation.
Right.
And that's what we're going to be exploring in part 2 of our deep dive. So stay tuned for that.
I'm excited to dig in. Welcome back. I hope everybody had a chance to, digest everything we covered in part 1.
Yeah, it was a lot.
A lot to take in, but understanding those hidden costs, that's really the first step towards creating a more sustainable, equitable food future.
Right. It's like we've been, kind of living in this blissful ignorance, picking up our groceries, not really thinking about the full story behind them.
Right.
But now that the veil has been lifted, I'm ready to, explore what we could do about it.
Yeah. And the good news is that the report isn't just, a diagnosis of the problem. It offers this roadmap for change,
Right.
focusing on what they call agri-food systems transformation.
Yeah, that phrase keeps popping up.
Yeah.
I have to admit, it still sounds a bit abstract to me.
Yeah,
Like, what does agri-food systems transformation actually look like in practice?
It's a complete overhaul of how we produce, distribute, and consume food.
Okay.
Moving away from a system that prioritizes, short-term profits and convenience towards one that values long-term sustainability, social justice, and the health of both people and the planet.
Okay, that makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
But it also sounds like a massive undertaking.
Right.
Like, where do we even begin?
Well, the report breaks down the transformation process into a few key areas, starting with the environmental impacts of food production.
Right, we talked about those earlier.
Good place.
Things like greenhouse gas emissions, water pollution, land degradation.
Exactly. And the report emphasizes the need for more sustainable agricultural practices to address those environmental costs.
So things like organic farming and, reducing pesticide use, protecting biodiversity. I mean, those are great in theory.
Yeah.
But, can they really feed a growing global population?
That's a question that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
The report acknowledges that there are challenges when it comes to sustainable agriculture. Productivity and cost effectiveness can be issues. But the report also argues that with the right investments in research, technology, infrastructure, we can overcome these challenges and make sustainable agriculture the norm.
So it's not just about individual farmers, making changes on their own.
No.
It's about creating a system that supports those changes.
Right, exactly.
Makes them viable on a larger scale.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of consumers, the report also highlights, the power of consumer choice in driving change.
Yeah.
So what are some specific things that consumers can do to, kind of support a more sustainable food system?
Well, I think we touched upon this in the first segment, but shifting to a more plant-forward diet.
Right, that surprising statistic about diets low in fruits, vegetables, and whole grains actually contributing more to hidden health costs than meat consumption.
A big one.
I mean, that was kind of mind-blowing for me.
Yeah.
But, going full vegetarian or vegan, that feels really daunting to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's definitely a big change.
Are there, smaller steps that we can take?
Absolutely. Start with incorporating 1 or 2 meatless meals into your week. Experiment with plant-based proteins, explore new recipes.
Okay.
Think of it as a culinary adventure, not deprivation.
Yeah, I like that. It's about adding more variety and color to our plates.
Exactly.
Not about, feeling restricted.
Right.
And it's not just about what we eat, it's also about where our food comes from, right?
Yeah.
Supporting local farmers and businesses is another really powerful way to make a difference.
For sure.
You mentioned, farmers markets, community-supported agriculture programs.
Yeah.
Those are great. But I'm not always able to get to those,
Right.
Are there other ways to kind of support local food systems?
Well, a lot of grocery stores are now highlighting locally sourced products, Look for those labels.
Okay.
Or even just ask the produce manager about their sourcing practices. Even just choosing a locally owned grocery store can make a difference.
It's like voting with your dollars, supporting the businesses and practices you want to see more of.
Exactly.
And speaking of voting, I mean, does the report talk about the role of policy in all of this? It seems like we need some kind of government action to really, like, shift the system.
Yeah, it emphasizes the need for governments to create policies that encourage sustainable agriculture, promote healthy diets, protect workers' rights.
Okay, so that's like subsidies for organic farming
Yeah.
or regulations on pesticide use.
Exactly. Things like investing in public transportation,
Oh,
so
yeah.
people can more easily access fresh food, implementing food labeling standards,
Okay.
so we can understand the environmental and social impacts of our food choices.
That would be amazing. Like, imagine being able to see a product's like carbon footprint
Yeah,
right there on the label next to the nutrition facts.
right, alongside calories.
Right.
Yeah, it could totally change the way we shop.
Yeah, it would.
But even without those labels, we can be informed consumers, Do your research.
Right.
Find out which companies are committed to sustainability and which ones are not.
So it's about being proactive, like seeking out information and using our voices to hold companies accountable.
Exactly.
Okay, so we can also, we were talking about using our voices.
Yeah.
We can also advocate for change within our own communities.
Right. Talk to your friends, your family, support local organizations that are working on food justice, sustainability.
Okay.
Contact your elected officials.
Okay.
Let them know that these issues matter.
It's about starting those conversations, raising awareness,
Yeah.
building momentum for change.
Creating that ripple effect. Yeah.
Exactly. And, it's not about being perfect, is it?
No, not at all.
It's about kind of taking steps in the right direction, even if they're small.
Absolutely.
Okay, I like that perspective.
Yeah,
Takes the pressure off, and makes it feel more manageable.
for sure.
So even if I forget my reusable bag at the grocery store or, slip up and order a burger instead of a veggie burger, it's not the end of the world.
We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
The important thing is to keep learning, keep trying,
Yeah.
keep pushing for a better food future.
This has been such an eye-opening, deep dive. I
Yeah.
feel like I've gone from feeling, kind of overwhelmed and helpless to like actually feeling empowered.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, it's like there's so much we can do,
Yeah,
individually and collectively to actually like change the system.
absolutely. It's a complex issue,
Yeah.
but we can create a food future that is good for people, good for the planet, and good for our taste buds.
Okay. So we've talked about, kind of the role of consumers and governments and businesses.
Yeah.
Are there any other kind of key players in this agri-food system transformation that we need to consider?
Yeah, the report talks about research and innovation.
Okay.
We need scientists and researchers to be developing new technologies and solutions that help us produce food more sustainably and efficiently.
Okay, so things like drought-resistant crops or, new methods for reducing food waste.
Exactly.
Okay.
We also need to invest in education and outreach, to raise awareness about these issues.
Right, making sure that everyone understands the hidden costs of our food system
Yeah,
and, the potential for positive change.
exactly. Knowledge is power. And the more informed we are, the better choices we can make
I love that.
to create that sustainable and equitable food future.
This is all great stuff. I have to admit, I'm still feeling a bit overwhelmed. It's such a complex issue, and it's hard to know where to even begin making changes.
I understand that feeling.
Mhm.
It's a big system,
Yeah.
but we don't have to do it all at once.
Okay.
Even small changes make a difference,
Yeah.
and they can inspire others
Yeah.
to take action as well.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about making progress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
we'll explore some of those steps you can take to start making those changes in your own life.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the hidden costs of our food system. Parts 1 and 2, we really kind of dug into the problems, the environmental damage, the social injustice, all the health consequences. It was a lot.
Yeah, a lot to process.
It is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to shift gears now
Okay.
and focus on solutions.
Yes.
We've talked about, the big picture stuff like government policies and business practices.
Right.
But what about us? Like, what can we as individuals do
Yeah.
to be a part of this agri-food system transformation?
It's a great question, and it's where I think a lot of people get stuck. The scale of the problem can make individual actions seem insignificant.
Yeah.
But the truth is that our everyday choices really do have a ripple effect.
So it's not just about, feeling helpless. Like my one little decision at the grocery store
Right.
isn't going to make a dent in, global greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, what if everyone felt that way?
Right.
Individual choices, when multiplied by millions,
Yeah.
they become these powerful market signals.
Okay.
They tell businesses what we value, and they influence what gets produced and how.
That's actually really empowering.
Yeah.
It's like we have this hidden power that we often forget about.
Right.
So where do we start? Like, what are some concrete actions that we can take?
Well, let's start with something we've already touched on. Our plates.
Yeah.
Shifting towards a more plant-forward diet is one of the most impactful things we can do, both for our health and the planet.
Right, that whole thing about diets, low in fruits and vegetables,
Yeah.
actually having a bigger impact on hidden health costs than meat consumption.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right?
It really is. I mean, it was mind-blowing to me, but going completely vegetarian or vegan feels daunting.
It is a big shift.
Are there like smaller steps we can take?
Absolutely. It's not about absolutes, it's about finding a balance that works for you.
Yeah.
So maybe start by incorporating 1 or 2 meatless meals into your week.
Okay.
Explore new recipes.
Yeah.
Experiment with plant-based proteins. Think of it as like a culinary adventure,
Yeah.
not deprivation.
Yeah, I like that it's about adding more variety and color to our plates.
Exact.
Not about feeling restricted.
Not at all.
And it's not just about what we eat. It's also about where our food comes from, right?
Yes, definitely.
Supporting local farmers and businesses is another really powerful way to make a difference.
Absolutely.
You mentioned, farmers markets and community-supported agriculture programs.
Yeah.
Those are great,
Yeah,
but I'm not always able to make it to those,
I understand. Yeah.
Are there other ways to kind of support local food systems?
Well, a lot of grocery stores now highlight locally sourced products.
Okay.
So look for those labels or ask the produce manager about their sourcing practices.
Okay.
Even just choosing a locally owned grocery store
Okay.
over a national chain can make a difference.
It's like voting with your dollars, supporting the businesses and practices you want to see more of.
Exactly.
And speaking of voting, I mean, does the report talk about the role of policy in all this?
Yeah.
It seems like we need some kind of government action to really shift the system.
Yeah, definitely. They emphasize the need for governments to create policies that encourage sustainable agriculture, promote healthy diets, and protect workers' rights.
Okay, so that's like subsidies for organic farming or regulations on pesticide use.
Yeah, exactly. Things like investing in public transportation
Okay,
so people can access fresh food more easily, implementing food labeling standards
right.
so we can understand the environmental and social impact of our food choices.
That would be amazing. Imagine being able to see a product's carbon footprint
I know, right?
right there on the label next to the nutrition facts.
Alongside the calories and the fat content.
Right. That would be a game changer.
It would completely change the way we shop.
Yeah, it would.
But even without those labels, we can be informed consumers,
Mm-hmm.
Do your research find out which companies are committed to sustainability and which ones are lagging behind?
So it's about being proactive, like seeking out information and using our voices to hold companies accountable.
Exactly. And speaking of using our voices, we can also advocate for change within our own communities.
Okay.
Talk to your friends and family about these issues. Support local organizations that are working on food justice and sustainability. Contact your elected officials. Let them know that these issues matter to you.
It's about creating a ripple effect, right?
Yes.
Starting conversations, raising awareness, building momentum for change.
Exactly.
And it's not about being perfect, is it?
No, not at all.
It's about taking steps in the right direction.
Yeah, just making progress.
Even if they're small. Okay, I like that perspective. It takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
It makes it feel more manageable.
For sure.
So even if I forget my reusable bag at the grocery store,
Right.
or, slip up and order a burger instead of a veggie burger, it's not the end of the world.
We're all human. We all make mistakes.
Right.
The important thing is to keep learning, keep trying,
Yeah.
and keep pushing for that better food future.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
It has been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I feel like I've gone from feeling overwhelmed and helpless to actually feeling empowered.
That's fantastic.
There's so much we can do,
Yeah.
individually and collectively
Yeah.
to actually change the system.
It's all connected.
It is.
It has been a pleasure diving into this complex and fascinating topic with you.
Likewise.
And remember, dear listener, change starts with each of us by making conscious choices, raising our voices, and working together. We can create a food system that nourishes us, sustains our planet, and promotes justice for all.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden costs of our food system. We hope you feel inspired to join us on this journey towards a more sustainable and equitable food future. Until next time, happy eating.